the key for success for any early stage life science company, it's not the innovation.
When you have this tension of innovation, and in order to try to translate that into execution, if you're doing too much at one time, you overpromise and underdeliver.
What is the extent where you feel like AI can create the efficiency?
You can't shortcut human connection in terms of relationship building and things like that. So you can't replace that with a machine.
My guest today is Carlo Odicino. He is the CEO and founder of One Team Partners, and he's spent about 24 years helping startups scale without falling into the common traps of overgrowth and inefficiency. So let's dive into this and have a chat with Carlo. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me, Harsh. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, and as I mentioned in the intro, you have told me this before, that the key for success for any early stage life science company is it's not the innovation. It's usually something else. So can you expand? What are the other factors that come into play?
Yeah, I think it's what a lot of people think about is they want to attribute a success or failure against the innovation or the product, and really what it comes down to is I would posit that no early stage companies, if the innovation isn't there, they don't get the funding. If you haven't, they've already cleared the bar that the innovation is valuable and can and could be valuable to the market, and particularly for life sciences, valuable to patient outcomes. What happens is the excitement that comes behind that then creates a tension of trying to do more instead of driving to the execution level of getting the product out to market. And in order to become very good at innovating versus executing, those things can come into tension because innovation by definition requires a lot of experimentation and trial and error, versus execution, you want to be very focused and be able to drive results rather than new ideas. And so what happens is when you have this tension of innovation, and in order to try to translate that into execution, if you're doing too much at one time, you're just creating an environment which I call, you overpromise and underdeliver, because the organization just isn't ready to be able to deliver on multiple things. It could likely deliver on one or two things. I like to say priority actually originally was defined as one, a single. What organizations early stage get very excited about the possibility of the innovation of what it could do in step 2, 3, and 4. And they lose sight of, well, we haven't even gotten to step 1 yet. And that creates a higher burn rate in terms of investment dollars than is necessary in order to get to step 1. And then once you get to step 1, consider step 2, step 3, so on and so forth. So really, it's this prioritization tension that I think causes the failure, trying to move too fast, scale too fast, and then putting the investment dollars into place to make that happen when you don't even need the scale that early. It can come later and you'll be just fine.
Right. No, you reminded me of the one quote. I don't know how it goes, but it's something like, if 3 things are your priority, then none of them is your priority, or something along those lines. So
yeah, my favorite part of our similarity to that is when I work with clients and I'll say, what is your priority? And then they will say, oh, well, this is priority 1A and this is priority 1B. And I'm like, no, what's the one? Like 1A and 1B is 2, even though you're calling them 1A and 1B. So,
yeah. And you also mentioned another good point about innovation and the difference between innovation and execution, and why innovation is, requires a different mindset. I'm looking at it right now. I had a book that literally talks about that same topic. Like, it has 2 different flywheels of what you should be doing when you're innovating, which is like experiment, collect the data, If you passed, then move on to the next experiment. If you failed, take that data, re-engineer your process using that data, try again, then re-engineer, try again, like
Hmm.
keep going. Whereas execution is more like, this is our step one, step two, step three, step four. We cannot go to step four until these are complete. We cannot go to step three until the it's more systematic. Whereas innovation, you need a lot of adaptation that needs to happen, because there is no one way to innovate, right? Because every
Hmm.
company is
Yeah.
innovating in its own way. So that, I think that was a really good distinction that you made. Do you have any examples of your work that you've done with startups? You can pick any example, but maybe an example where you came in and you helped the company was really good at innovating, but not so much at execution, and you helped them. Or maybe they were good at execution, but within that they weren't prioritizing, or their team was disengaged. So any example you want to pick and share some practical tips, that would be great.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and this is I'm thinking of a specific example, but it's broad to
Yeah.
others where, a lot of the key innovations that come out across, and where a lot of the investment dollars are going, is that the innovation is what they would consider a platform technology. So it
Mm.
is, yes, it's designed, and in this particular instance, it's designed as a diagnostic to diagnose a specific form of cancer, but the underlying technology can be used to diagnose multiple kinds of cancer, right? So it's a platform
True.
technology.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of excitement. Investment dollars sometimes will drive because of the potential of the platform, then drives investment into the organization that allows them to try to get that first, what I would call, indication to market, or that first
Hmm.
use case of the platform technology to market. Now, that then creates a tension, because the investors who invested in the company, a lot of times they're like, okay, I get it. You're doing one. When is the next one?
Mm.
And, they want to know that roadmap. And I think a lot of times folks that work in the company interpret that question as, I want to know when that, how soon can you get that next use case for that platform technology into place?
Yep.
Uh, and most of the time, in my experience, it's actually, so I share with people, what is your interpretation when you hear, I'd like that as soon as possible? Most people will
Mm.
say, it's like tomorrow, some version of tomorrow or next week. But if you actually think of the
Yeah.
words like, I'd like that as soon as possible, it's up to you to define what that is. And
Mm.
as soon as possible could be 3 years down the road. And here's why. And
Yep.
so I think, where a lot of organizations, when they're dealing with like the leaders that are working in the company, and then dealing with a board, they feel this pressure that may or may not be there, without aligning to, okay, understood, I heard you want to know when our next use case is going to be deployed. Let me share the story of, here's the roadmap to getting that first use case, and where we can leverage that learning along the way to then get to the next one and the next one. And so the second, third, fourth, whatever,
Yep.
ends up being much farther down the road, let's say. And much farther, I'm saying, instead of within the next year, you say it's going to be within 3 years, or in year three, and then the next one is year five. So many times when you look at this roadmap and it's all compacted into 1 year, and then you start breaking that down into what that means for the organization, what's your hiring plan is to be able to meet that kind of stuff, because anything with version one has issues. So how do you fix the bugs, for lack of a
Yep.
better term, refine the product? If you aren't telling that story holistically, then you're losing out on an opportunity to essentially explain why things are going to come later than maybe somebody originally thought of, particularly investor or a board member. But if you can explain that in a rational way, and give sound reasoning behind it, you start to see that tension start to alleviate of this pressure of do everything now. And, you know, most board members and investors, dollar signs mean something to them, and you can tell the story as very simply, and I've been worked with clients very simply, is just tell the story of objectively, yeah, we could do, work on ABC at the same time, and here's what it translates into: hiring, expense, all of that. Um,
Yep.
and then usually that's enough to say, no, we don't want you to do that. Just spend as much
Right.
as you need to get to A, and then we'll worry about B and C later. But sometimes the question gets interpreted too quickly as, oh, we need it now, and so we need to worry about what's executed now. And then the innovation side of it that comes up, which is, oh, we see another market opportunity for an innovation that is outside of your core competency in terms of innovation. And so, as an example, cell and gene therapy, when it first came out,
Yep.
the whole idea concept of chain of identity, chain of custody, and moving product from patient material from a clinical site to a manufacturer and back was, oh, well, we need to manage those logistics in house. Well, you're not a logistics company. You're a cell and gene
Mm.
therapy company. So outsource those logistics. Don't try to figure out those logistics. There are logistics companies that exist, FedEx, UPS, that are very good at that. So don't try to innovate where that's out of your lane, because it's creating a need to build an expense that you just don't need to capture at that point in time.
Right. No, that's a really good point. And I'm glad you brought up the example of cell and gene therapy. And also, you mentioned about, I want to switch gears into a different topic, but there's something that came to my mind as you were talking about investing and like showing the expense that if you want us to focus on three programs, this is what it's going to look like. But we've also seen, sometimes that investors, the board of directors, and the companies do take that path. It creates a lot of publicity or recognition. Rise in the stock, what have you, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 years later, when they get through the different phases and look at the data, they come back and say, well, we should have not started this third one. And then there's like a segment of the company that's laid off. They reorganize those, dollars, and they push it to the other two, right? So it's kind of like I look at those things and I'm like, they've got to know out of like right off the gate that out of these three, this is a unicorn. These other two are, plan B and plan C. But then eventually the plan C just falls off the wagon, and they shoot for the A and
Yeah.
B, right? So that's an interesting thing.
Yeah, I mean that is the tension, because you start off with that nuance of like the money, and then you have investors
Hmm.
that really want to say, yeah, we're fine, we're let's invest in it. Well, at some point in time, you're not going to be fine, so you have to plan for that, and
Yeah.
again, not over promise and under deliver. Even in terms of hiring, it can be a blessing and a curse to have that much amount of capital that's infused into an organization, because you're absolutely right. What people don't remember when you don't hit a specific milestone that you were anticipating is the people it impacts when you have to let people go.
Right.
and
Right.
as and you really want to manage that to not overhire and still be able to drive progress, meaningful progress.
Yep. Agree. Yeah. Talking about people, that's a good segue into the next topic I have to discuss. And this is something you and I have talked about before, and you even shared this in other podcasts and things, which is creating a people first environment, right? So when you're
Mm-hmm.
working at a 10 or a 20-person startup, it's much easier for the leadership to be in sync, engaged with all the people, know them by their first names, know who's getting married, who's had a baby, whose parents are sick or whatnot, or who got a new dog, right? But if you are working at 1,000 or a 5,000 person company, it is not possible to do that at a personal level. So, my first question is, to create that people first environment, should that be
Mhm.
coming from leadership, or should that be coming from a different department like HR?
I definitely think it needs to come from leadership, and it depends on who's the leader of the. Like it needs to start at the CEO
Yep.
and the leadership level. What I would say is sometimes that CEO in early stages is also the founder, sometimes it's not. But what it really needs to be driven by is what is the core set of values that the organization is going to be about. And core set of values I
Hmm.
think of as things that here's what we believe as an organization. And I recommend folks distill that down to 3 to 5 really kind of primary values that you think makes your organization unique. You can kind of think of organizations as people too. Like everybody has their own personality, a set of values, and things
Yep.
like that. And so an organization needs to have its own set of values. The reason why it's important, because to me that values driven approach drives your mission, drives your vision, because you can directly point to here's what we're doing. We believe this, and here's what we're doing in order to show that we believe it.
Hmm.
Why I say that is important is you see on a lot of websites, here's what we value, and yet you ask the organization, okay, um, we value. You can see a lot work life balance as an example of a
Yep.
value, and to me that sometimes in practice turns into a slogan versus an
Hmm.
actual lived value. It's like, what do we do as an organization that makes you feel like that, right?
Yep.
And so the importance of having a clearly stated set of values is, as you grow in an organization, if you're very disciplined about it, you say, here's our clearly stated set of values. Our expectation is that you hold us accountable to living these values, and
Hmm.
please call us out when we don't.
Yep.
Because anybody, a person or an organization, can have a very clear direction about what they want, but they're not going to get it 100%, and that's not the point. The point is you're inviting people in to hold you accountable to that. So as you grow from the 10 to 20 to the 50 to the 100, um, you shouldn't have a set of values that says we will know everybody intimately. Like that's a hard thing to live up to. But you can
Yep.
say that as an organization, we do care about individuals and the individual, and so we set up our organizational structure whereby each manager only has up to 6 people that report
Hmm.
directly into them, so that each of those 6 people, and as it scales, can be known and can be seen by their manager.
Very good point. Yeah.
And that's just an example of that. How do you sort of think of a set of values and then be able to scale that to a level that makes sense? And I do share with clients that there are 2 types of values. One that are the distinguishing values, the values that set you apart as an organization, and what the other set is the table stakes values. So don't talk about honesty, integrity. You can talk about them as like holistic. These are basic
Hmm.
values that we want everybody to live, but they're not what hold us apart. These are the
Right.
set of values that set you apart and what makes you unique. The reason why I like that model, one, it can be it creates a sense of ownership within the organization that we are empowered to live these values and hold the leaders accountable to their behavior and living those values.
Hmm.
It also has the benefit of when you're trying to hire and recruit people, if you have that common language core set of values, applicants can then say, am I a good fit because this aligns with my values? Or they can say, I'm not a good fit because it doesn't align with my values. And that's okay, right?
Mm.
You're not trying to be everything to everyone. You're trying to be something meaningful for the right people where their values align with yours as an organization.
Yeah. No, that's you mentioned about you gave the example of work life balance as one of the values.
Mm-hmm.
And when you were talking about it, another example that came to my mind is, let's say, knowledge sharing, or democratizing information. I keep seeing this, right? So, like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, when you are a 20 or a 50-person company, it is possible to do, a company meeting every month or every other week, and be able to share what you're doing with those people. But now when you go to the stage of having 5,000, 10,000 employees, where half of them are in a different time zone, you no longer have the luxury to do that, right? So then either you need to stop saying that that's still your value because you're not able to actively demonstrate it, or you need to figure out to say, hey, we can't no longer get sandwiches and salad and get 20 people in our company and talk about it because we have 5,000 people. This is now going to go
Mm-hmm.
into a Zoom or some kind of event, and that's our new way, right? So it's always like, and you mentioned work life balance. I was hoping that you wouldn't mention it, because I feel
Uh,
like ever since COVID, this it's more like the phrase has been used so much, like on LinkedIn and company events, that I'm actually confused for multiple reasons. I don't know if there is this thing like work life balance. And when companies are using that phrase, what are they talking about? Are they talking about 50-50 of work life? Because that's not how the reality is, right? Like, I
mm-hmm.
have a 4-year-old toddler, I have a 3-month-old baby, I'm a business owner, I'm a consultant. There are days when I'm working 80% of the time and the life is 20%. And then there are other days when life is 80% and the work is 20, right? So,
Yeah, I think, and I shared that as an example of what other companies have said, but I completely agree in terms of I think there's the it's a misnomer to call it work life balance. Number one,
mm,
it implies that work is somehow outside of your life when it isn't. It can be an all
yep.
consuming part of your life,
Mm,
and so why are we making this artificial distinction between what I think people mean is work life and non work life. So, what do I
yeah.
do while I'm at work versus what do I do while I'm at work? The issue that has come up very acutely, particularly since COVID, was we were faced with a situation where work and life had to, or work life and non work life had to blend together. I
Mm,
used to be able to go into an office, and now I'm logging in at home, and there's a room that if I'm fortunate enough to have an office and I have a home office, and so I'm doing that work. But that creates this tension of work life blending that work is ever present
mm,
and you cannot disconnect. And so, internal to one team, we have this concept of we want life balance, but the other thing that we value is the ability to be present. And so, and why I say that is we want to be able to say, when I'm working, I'm fully present at work. And when I'm not working, taking my kid to school, um, coaching my son's flag football team, I am present at that
mm,
place and I'm not worried about work. I've either don't have my phone on me or I've turned off notifications. And the value of that creates the balance, because what I think where people start to feel burnout in this idea of work life balance, what they really say in execution, it becomes work life blending. Work is just ever present. I can be
yep.
contacted at any time and I will respond, depending on the culture within minutes or an hour or whatever. Like, and that just creates, I use the analogy of a computer they're not much more effective. But the older computers, as a process that is consistently running in the background, that's causing your CPU to overheat. If you
Hmm.
cannot turn off certain things, in this case, things that are related to work, it's as if you're running that process in the background constantly, and it's undermining your ability to be present for things that matter to you. Um,
Yep.
and work isn't all evil either. Like, I think there's this idea that work, if you focus too much on work, it is it's a bad thing. Well, certain people at certain life stages, work is really meaningful, and the amount of time they spend on it, they're very energized by it, and that's okay. And then later life stages, they may say, well, this is taking a more of a priority for me, and so I don't want work to be as all consuming, so I'm going to choose this different path. And it's not a it doesn't need to be this kind of zero sum game that people make it out to be. It's just about things keeping what I would say in fluid balance.
Hmm.
So like keep it in fluid balance. It doesn't mean we're at scales and everything is weighs the same. It's for the particular point in time, I am focused on what truly matters to me at that point in time, and I'm not trying to focus on that and focus on something else at the same time. I can
Right.
switch back and forth.
Yeah,
So,
and there's a lot of there's a lot of, I would say, cultural norms where in US, at least I've seen that it's common if you're in certain professions to even have like a late evening call, or if you have counterparts in different countries, then you have those meetings. And I understand, like, if you have somebody in Japan and you're in US, like, there you have to do that, because there's otherwise you're never going
mhm,
to be able to see that person. But what I've observed when I was working at companies that had multiple sites is that people in Europe were able to clearly draw the line in sand and say, like I'll give you an example. Last week I emailed a client at 4:30 p.m. on Friday, and I said, "Hey, so and so, I hope you had a great week. I am just about to log off, but I wanted to send this document to you so that you have it, on Monday." That
mhm,
person replied to me on LinkedIn and said, "Thanks, I got it, but I'll check it on Monday." Right? Like, they know that I'm not gonna check this. Like, they could have easily checked and said, "Yeah, this is what I think." But I've
mhm,
observed that people in Europe are much, I don't know, they're really good at drawing that line, to say, no, I'm going to
mhm.
respond to this on Monday. Have you
Yeah,
noticed any like dynamics like that in different countries or different environments?
for sure. It's definitely one of those. I've been on teams that are global teams,
Mm,
and being in California, um, and the Pacific time zone can create
yep.
this tension where you're waking up early to get on a call because you need to work with the team that's in Europe that's towards the end of their day, and they're very like I remember one
Yeah.
project I was supporting was there's like a 9 hour time difference
Mm,
between the team, and so we had to have all calls typically end by 7 a.m. because that was what 4 p.m. in
in
Europe,
Germany,
and
yeah.
yeah, in Germany. And if you didn't finish by 7, they're leaving and to get on the train to go home. Like
Yeah.
they were, and they were unapologetic about it, which is good. Like that's not, but then they did a good job of creating that boundary. But then in the U.S. culture, I think we're not great at creating that boundary, because then that same group or that same project, we were getting on a call late at night to then be able to pick up the you know China or Singapore, right?
Mm,
And
mm.
so you're like running from 6 a.m. or sometimes 5 a.m. in the morning to 6 7 o'clock at night to span those time zones. And it just becomes untenable after a while.
Yeah.
And one of the best global teams that I ever worked with was there was a commitment up front that we understand that sometimes we'll have to have meetings at very bad hours for some members of our team. And what we're going to do is we're going to share the wealth. It's going to rotate. And I was
Hmm.
like, okay, like, so if you have a weekly meeting and it's 4 different regions, once one out of every 4 of those meetings is going to be at an inconvenient time, but everybody is inconvenienced at the and I think that's a good compromise to do. But a lot of times, I think because of American work culture, which is always go go go, we lose sight of that boundary setting that is so important to be able to recharge. Uh,
Yeah,
um,
yeah. And even like even in US, I've seen that if you are in like San Francisco or New York or Boston versus Texas, it can be very different of how you operate.
mhm.
Like it's strange that it's the same
Yeah,
country, but the
yeah,
people's, they operate in a very different manner.
it is just dealing with the and technology has allowed that those different cultures to
Hmm.
interact much more than we would when there was a lot more face to face
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, we've talked about creating a people first environment. I want to throw another dimension in there, which is,
Hmm.
everybody's talking about AI and,
Hmm.
AI taking over humans' job, specifically if it's just manual administrative tasks. Then, if you're responding to chat messages about a, product complaint, then AI can ask those questions and get that data. You don't need a human until,
Hmm.
you come in. So, um, but at the same time, you can argue that there are some roles that AI will never be able to do. Like, for example, AI will never be able to be a leader because that requires some element of human connection,
Hmm.
which no matter how great AI is, it's not going to get to that point, and people will still be leading companies and organizations and
Hmm.
building teams. So,
Hmm.
question I have for you there is, what is the extent where you feel like AI can create the efficiency, and what are some areas where you feel like the human connection is irreplaceable?
Well, I think it's just that the human connection is irreplaceable, and to have a good, you can't shortcut human connection in terms
Hmm.
of relationship building and things like that. So I operate by a model of relationship is built off of conversation. There is no
Hmm.
relationship without conversation.
True.
Well, in order to have a conversation with somebody, it requires a rich and meaningful conversation requires trust on both sides and a connection, a certain level of connection. You can't replace that with a machine. You will never
Hmm.
be able to replace that with a machine because a machine, even though it can display or mimic emotion sometimes and things like that, it's not feeling the way we feel. Like it's not leveraging the all 5 human senses that I think come into what creates human connection. Now, I would argue the best use of AI, depending on different, it's have it help accelerate things that are important to the business, but that can be done much faster. Like, build AI models to write a procedure, or at least
Hmm.
give you a good first draft, or format a document. These are things that, like, I don't think any human being really likes to do a lot. Like, have but then use it, leverage it in a way that allows you more time, because time is one of those things that is just not a scalable resource to build connection with the ultimate goal of connection then drives innovation, which that we can then problem solve to much richer things, because we've used technology in a way that doesn't replace us, it augments our natural ability to make connections, to recognize patterns, to truly, create and innovate.
Yep.
If you use technology to kind of address all the things that used to take us a long time, or if we try to do it and they can do it much faster, so that we can then augment our ability to problems connect and problem solve and innovate.
Mm. No, I agree with that. Because it is, it is going to be a challenge for the workplace, just because we've gone through this phase of doing manual work in terms of documentation, or and moving then into having technology and cloud systems and internet. So we've already seen how the workplace has evolved 20 years ago, where you would actually call somebody and talk to them, but today you're sending them a Slack or a Teams message and getting on a call, right? So that wasn't happening, but now it's very common. It happens in every
Mm-hmm.
company. So it'll be interesting just to see what happens to the workplace 20 years from now as AI, embeds into different workflows.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's the kind of, that's something I'm excited about, just to see what that looks like 20 years
Yeah.
from now. I know you have to drop off, but before we get off this discussion, what is your message to somebody who has listened to this episode, and that wants to become a effective leader in life sciences and apply any of the things that we've discussed today?
Yeah, I think, and what I would say is our approach has always been similar to what I said earlier, which was to build a relationship. It starts with a conversation. So anybody that
Mm,
wants to kind of learn more and help kind of unpacking their particular issues that they're facing, or things that they want to address, I invite them into a conversation, and we can talk about whatever is top of mind. I usually start that conversation with either one of two questions that are very similar: is how do you sleep at night,
mm,
or what gets you up in the morning, and then just
yep.
see where that goes. But on our website, oneteampartners.com, there's a page there that they can look at my schedule and pick a time that is convenient for them to have a 30-minute conversation and see where it goes from there.
Sounds great. Yeah, we'll put that link in there, and we'll also put the link to your LinkedIn profile. All right. Thank you, Carlo, for a really great conversation. And I love everything that you shared. I think these topics don't get discussed enough, because you don't think about this until you actually have a problem, or you're able to, but these apply to every industry, right? This is not just life sciences. Anything we discussed today could be applied to tech, automobile, whatever industry you're working in. So these are really important points, because I think the key takeaway is, at the end of the day, the world moves and the work gets done because of human motivation, which is either intrinsic or extrinsic. And every leader has to understand that they're dealing with humans, the most complex creature and machinery on this world. And
Mm-hmm.
until we understand that, it becomes really hard to get anything done. So I love this conversation.
Yes, I did too. Thank you for having
Yeah.
me.
Thank you, Carlo.